All right, welcome back to the podcast. Now it is time, our first divisional NFL preview of the offseason heading into the regular season. We are starting up north in the NFC North. We are going to hit the Lions, Green Bay, Minnesota, and the Chicago Bears. And we're also going to give you a little Big Ten preview as well here as college football is just a couple of weeks away. No better person to do that with than our guy up in the Midwest, up in Detroit, WHMI, VSIN, the DTM Squatch Club dot picks, my guy Dan Leach up in Detroit Rock City. How you doing, Dan?
Fantastic. It was a brilliant intro until you botched the website, but it's totally fine.
Okay.
DTMSquatchPicks.club. But
Oh,
it's all about bringing the people in for greatness. And as I was mentioning with you before we got going here, we obviously have a great friend in common, TJ Reeves, who's our shepherd, our hero. And any friend of his is a great friend of mine. So it's great to be with you.
I love talking to Dan. I met Dan back in the during the NCAA tournament. He did some. He was up in Detroit at the regional up there, so I got to meet Dan up there, talk to
That was
Dan
a
for the
very
first.
emotional segment, if I must say.
It was. It was. You were
I,
courtside and all, man.
yep, I was talking to you guys live courtside after those crazy games.
That's it. That's it. All right, Dan, we're going to hit some NFC North. We're going to start where you're at up in Detroit. The Lions finally win a playoff game. They win the division. They win two playoff games,
Yeah, I
actually.
was going to say, not just one.
They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They beat Stafford, who came back to town and beat him. And then they had a very winnable game there at the end in San Francisco, come up just a little bit short. But what a run there by the Lions and Dan Campbell, coming off a 12-5 year NFC title game. They re-sign a bunch of their guys. Amon St. Brown, Penei Sewell get back in the mix, and some others. Give me a little overview of the Lions going into this year of expectations versus being the hunter.
Yeah, listen, it's Jason. It's such a different scenario than it's been, and I've been lucky to cover this team. I mean, going back to when I was in college, and I obviously as a fan, I was lucky that my grandpa, and my dad had season tickets. During the Barry Sanders era, they had tickets going back to the '40s, and I was at the one playoff win in my lifetime against the Dallas Cowboys in January '92, and I'll never forget the day because my dad, we used to have parking included with our tickets. He forgot to buy it for the playoffs. It was only $5 at the stadium, the old Great Silverdome, my favorite all-time stadium, by the way. And that day he forgot the parking, and it was $20. And I'm like, $20? This must be a huge day. But that was the only playoff win, Jason. And then to see what they were able to do, obviously not just last season, but the year before, ending the season, winning 8 or 9 games. Obviously, there is momentum is a real thing in the NFL. To be able to have covered this team for decades now and go on that run with them last year, and I'll give you, I think, a very poignant moment because you mentioned San Francisco. I was obviously out there for WHMI, and it was just an honor to be there. It was a great game. I remember going out for some calisthenics at halftime with the Lions with a big lead, and the Niners fans were just walking around saying, by the way, calisthenics means a smoke break. Uh, when I was walking around outside the press box, all these Niners fans were just walking around saying, "What the hell's going on? What's happening?" They
Yeah.
thought they were done, and
Yeah.
obviously I'm on with my travel agent booking my flight to Vegas. Luckily, I didn't pull the trigger, but it was just such a crazy and incredible experience until it wasn't. But I remember being in that locker room, and you mentioned Penei Sewell, who's obviously one of the great offensive linemen in the NFL. Thank God they've extended him; he'll be around for a long time. I firmly believe not just because I cover the Lions that the Lions' offensive line is the number one offensive line in the league. I mean, obviously, there's arguments can be made that maybe it's number two or number three, but it has been incredible. But I went up to Penei Sewell after that game in the locker room. A lot of the lines kind of were, not that they didn't want to talk to us, but there wasn't much to say.
Right.
And Penei Sewell was always a leader throughout the year. And I remember I went right up to him. I was the first one to ask him a question, and I just talked to him about all the different history and the bad history, and just losing this game and not getting to the Super Bowl take away from that, even though obviously they didn't come there to lose. I remember they played this clip on Sports Center. It went viral because he kept swearing. He said that don't mean blank, and he said it 3 times, and that's basically all he said to me and
Yeah.
pretty much everyone else. And to me, what that shows me is that this team embodies Dan Campbell. This team embodies their GM Brad Sherlock Holmes, as I call him, and that they are not going with moral victories like the Lions used to. They planned on winning that game and winning the
Uh-huh.
freaking Super Bowl. And Jason, that is a totally different scenario that we've had, even going back to the Barry Sanders era, because the Lions did have some good years. They went to the playoffs 4 or 5 years under Wade Fonts, but they never could win. And
Yep.
it wasn't like they believed they were good enough to. This team not only believes they're good enough to, they expect to. And seeing them at training camp this year, seeing them the last couple of seasons grow into a team that not just they play to win, they don't play not to lose. And that's why you got to take both sides of this whole Dan Campbell going forward way too many times, let's be honest, on fourth down. The reason they were 12-5, first time they had 12 since 91, the reason they won their first playoff game and now two since 1992, first time ever they won two playoff games in a season, is because Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes started a team and this growth, what they want to do going forward, as a team that believes they're going to go out there and win every time they put the pads on. And that's been the difference, Jason. And that's why, yes, you've got a Green Bay team. Obviously, this gave Jordan Love a ton of money. We'll see if that works out. But they're obviously they're a talented team. The Vikings obviously have kind of fallen off the map. We'll see what Caleb Williams can do with, I believe, an improving Bears team, but still expectations way higher than they should be for year one with
Right.
Caleb Williams. But Eberflus and the polls, the GM have done a good job there. The Lions are the hunted, as you mentioned. It has been a long time since the Lions could say that. Probably back to that Barry Sanders era in the 90s. Maybe periods of time with Jim Caldwell, they were kind of the hunted in a little bit, a year or two, but that really wasn't it.
And
And look, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, I was gonna say the interesting thing is they kept the two coordinators too. Everybody thought Ben Johnson was gonna be
Yes.
gone, Aaron Glenn potentially being gone. They keep both those guys in the mix too, so the continuity of the systems and everything they've been doing stays in place.
Oh, it does. And listen, Jared Goff has become a top five type quarterback. Is he Mahomes? Is he, Lamar Jackson? No, of course, never. He won't be. But he metrically is right there. The defensive line, they've had an incredible training camp. I've been out there, obviously, watching these guys. They've, stayed relatively healthy, by the way. Aiden Hutchinson has been incredible. Lee McNeil's been incredible. And you look at what the Lions have lacked for years, Jason, consistency and not a lot of holes up and down that, roster. They don't have that issue anymore. And, they had another great draft. All four of these drafts have been great under Brad Holmes, and they've metrically proven to be some of the best drafts in recent memory in the NFL. So the expectation is the Lions go right back out there with this division again and rectify what happened last year against the Niners, win the NFC title game, and get to that first ever Super Bowl. But I will tell you this, you got to, in the NFL, temper expectations year to year
Right.
because it's such a league of parity. Doesn't mean the Lions are saying, oh, if we don't go to the playoffs, it's okay. Lions have to be a playoff team. But
Right.
getting back to the NFC title game will not be easy. If they don't get there, the season's not a failure. I said last year if the Lions did win the division and win at least one playoff game, to
Yep.
me in year three of this Holmes Campbell experiment, which is obviously going
Tremendous.
great, it would have been a failure. This year they've got to keep winning playoff games, but if they don't go to the Super Bowl, the season's not a failure. But Dan Campbell's talked about this, Jason. It's a limited window. You gotta pounce at it. You got to take an attack like a lion when you have that chance.
One thing I'll say, and we'll move on to the next our next to the Bears. The one area they've got to shore up, and they tried to do it in the offseason, is that secondary. Carlton
Yes.
Davis acquisition. They've struggled in the secondary seemingly the last couple of years. What do you think they've done enough in the secondary to shore that up?
And I'll tell you this, my friend, Terrion Arnold, kind
Yep.
of the surprise draft pick. Yeah, I was out there. I was actually outside because the draft, of course, here in Detroit. And when they announced the Lions were trading up, and then they announced the pick, people lost their freaking minds. I haven't heard a crowd that loud in a long time. So, you look at what Terrion Arnold could bring at quarterback. Kirby Joseph ended up getting a fight yesterday with or recently at Giants Lions joint practices with Malik Neighbors. But I think you look at the secondary and you look at Melanafu, you look at Brian Branch, who was a Rookie of the Year candidate last year.
Yep.
I think this secondary is getting better. I want to see what happens early in this season, the regular season.
Yep.
And obviously, Kindle Vildor is another guy, a backup cornerback that's going to be in the mix in nickel packages. I know Emmanuel Mosley just got hurt, which is tough. But this is a secondary, Jason. I think it's going to be much improved. And if you look at what Terry and Arnold can bring, and guys like Vildor and some others that obviously were factors last year, and this could be a much different looking back half of the Lions defense than it's been.
Let's go to Chicago. Bears wrap up 7-10. They get the number one pick through the Carolina trade, and they get Caleb Williams. Obviously, they move on from Justin Fields. Williams, they bring in a ton of expectations. Everybody thinks Caleb is going to fit right in. I'm with you. I don't think that's going to be as seamless as everybody thinks it is. Give me a thought. They keep Eberflus in the mix. A lot of people thought
Yep.
they might get rid of Eberflus, bring in an offensive guy. They do bring in Shane Waldron from Seattle to be the new OC. They bring in they draft Odunze from Washington. They bring in Keenan Allen. They add DeAndre Swift, so they do fortify the offense to help Caleb. But give me a thought on the Bears here as we go into a pivotal, lots of expectations in the Windy City.
Well, yeah, I was going to give you a two-word answer, Romeo Odunze, because I saw the guy obviously up close and personal with Michigan winning the national title. But I'll tell you this, I think that their expectations are way overblown. And that's not coming from a Lions fan. I mean, obviously, I can be objective. I think Caleb Williams could end up being really, really good. The Bears, similarly to what the Lions did 2 years ago, had a great end of the season, including a pretty big win, a dominating win in the end against Detroit late in the season in Chicago. That being said, the NFL, as I mentioned to you, it's a league of parity. Your families are always rising and falling in America. You go worst to first. I don't see it with the Bears this season. I think there's going to be a lot of growing pains with Caleb Williams. I think they're going to have some great moments. They're going to have a lot of bad ones. And then you look at the defense. I mean, obviously bringing in Montez Sweat and they've got some talent there. But in this division with the Packers and Lions, could end up being 4 losses for the Bears, or at least 3. It's not going to be easy for them to be that much improved on a 7-win year coming off of last season. To me, that's kind of where I think they'll be again. But they'll look better, they'll feel better, they'll be more confident, and they'll be the kind of team like the Lions were before last season, the year before that. You feel really good about 26, or I'm sorry,
25,
25,
right?
if you're a Chicago Bears fan. This is a year like the Lions used 2 seasons ago to really kind of get ready to launch and become a team that is a legit contender. The Bears this year will not be that, but they'll be fun to watch at times.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because I mean everybody thinks Caleb's just gonna step right in. This guy's played so much street yard ball at USC. Can he play in structure? Can the offensive line in front of him block? I mean, because to me they've had a poor offensive line the last several years. To me, that's the big key there. And can the defense bring Caleb along? So maybe it is week 10 or 11 before he starts really getting it. Can the defense bring them along long enough to be able to stay in the hunt there, whether it's for a wild card spot or not? But I'm with you. I think the Bears are probably 1 year away from being major contenders there.
And by the way, Jason, Caleb Williams, I mean, listen, the guy who won the Heisman a couple years ago, awesome. He wasn't great at times last season.
Yes.
USC, obviously, they did at the talent level they had the year before, but this is a guy that, he deserved to go overall number 1. I would have taken him there as well if I'm the Bears, but he was not phenomenal last season in college like he was the year before.
Correct.
He definitely is so talented, though. He can translate that, but it's going to be growing pains for sure.
Let's go to Minnesota. 7-10. They lose Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. They end up drafting a guy you know well, which we'll talk about here in a second, J.J. McCarthy out of Michigan. Kind of a new era there. Doesn't look like McCarthy's going to start here early on. Probably going to be Sam Darnold early.
Yeah.
You got a Justin Jefferson extension. Defense loses some guys, kind of in the middle of a rebuild, kind of a half rebuild, not a full blown rebuild, but kind of a half rebuild. Give me a thought or two about Minnesota.
Yeah, I just think we're in baseball season right now for just not too much longer. Thank God football's back. But I'll give you an analogy. If people remember the Philadelphia Phillies after they won the World Series, they kind of rebuilt on the fly. That's kind of what the Vikings are doing. You mentioned kind of a half rebuild. I will say this. I think the leash, I don't know if the over-under on Sam Darnold is a quarter, is a game and a half. It's very short, that leash. You get it on Amazon, and it's going to get ripped up. J.J. McCarthy, being the Wolverine fan, watching that guy grow into one of the great quarterbacks, probably the best quarterback Michigan's ever had, other than a guy named Tom Brady, who wasn't as good as JJ was at Michigan.
Right.
Obviously, later on, Tom Brady did some things, a couple here and there. I think JJ McCarthy's going to do a great job there, but it's not going to happen right away. Much like Caleb Williams for McCarthy, and he's not even starting right away, like Caleb Williams is in Chicago. Maybe year 2 or 3, you really see McCarthy become a massive factor as an NFL quarterback. That being said, you mentioned Jefferson. He is incredible. Jordan Addison, incredible.
Yeah.
Obviously, TJ Hawkinson's been banged up at times, the former Lion. But I think that McCarthy walks into a great situation weapon-wise. The offensive line can leave a little bit to be desired there at times, but they've got good front office executives that are able to get the job done in building that team. It's going to take a couple years. They're going to definitely, in my opinion, be the worst team in the NFC North. Doesn't mean they're going to be awful,
right?
But they're not going to be a team that's going to contend this year for a playoff spot. But they will be a fly in the ointment for teams like Detroit and Chicago and Green Bay that have to, face them twice. And it's obviously a very tough out in Minnesota, no matter how good or bad the Vikings are. It's a house of horrors for the Lions for way too long. But I think it's going to be a lot of, speaking of growing pains, a lot of growing pains for JJ McCarthy when he ends up taking over the starting spot. And just as a team, they've got, this incredible talent with Jefferson, Addison, Hawk, like I mentioned. Defense, I just think they're
Yeah.
going to give up a lot of points.
Yeah.
And to me, they're going to be a struggle bus for much of the year. They'll win a game, lose two, win two, lose four.
You're
It's going
right.
to be like that in Minnesota.
And they got a good coach. O'Connell's a good offensive guy.
Oh, yeah.
For a guy that you know McCarthy well, what's going to be his biggest adjustment going from Michigan, the offense they kind of ran at Michigan, a lot more run oriented, to
Yeah.
now more of a free flowing offense in Minnesota?
No, I think you just hit the nail on the head. For me, and listen, JJ McCarthy, when he threw, was incredible. He just didn't throw that much. And people would say, oh, wow, why is he being talked about for the Heisman? His numbers are terrible. When it came down to accuracy and TD to interception ratio and fitting balls into tight spots and making huge plays in the pass game when he needed to, he was on top of it for his entire career, especially on the route to the national championship last year. So to me, the biggest adjustment will be the speed in the NFL defenses, but throwing a lot more than he was used to his
Right.
last couple of years at Michigan. And that's why, to me, I mentioned the over-under on Darnold could be a quarter, but you look at when McCarthy will end up taking over the starting job. Will it be later in year one? Will it be earlier? Is it possible Darnold starts the whole season? I guess it could be. I doubt it. And obviously, if the Vikings are a team that are going to miss the playoffs, JJ is going to be in there at some point, unless for, knock on wood, he gets injured. You don't want to see that happen. But to me, it's going to be like the back half of year one and then really training camp into year two, where he really will feel a
Yeah.
lot more confidence throwing the ball a lot more than he was used to at Michigan. And listen, they've got a run game in Minnesota. They've got Aaron Jones. They've got, some pieces there to be able to take the pressure off JJ, but he's going to have to throw a lot. And it's a throwing league, and that's going to take him some time, probably 2 years.
All right, let's wrap it up. The NFC North. We're along with Dan Leach, WHMI up in Detroit, giving us a great preview of the whole division. Let's go to Green Bay, 9-8 last year. They go to Dallas and smash the Cowboys, then they have a chance to beat the Niners. And Love comes up a little light in the fourth quarter. There, they give Love the huge extension. They bring in a new DC, the former Boston College coach Jeff Hafley. Youth on offense. They got great young receivers, young talent all over the place on offense. The defense is kind of a little bit of underachieving the last couple of years. Thus the move with Jeff Hafley. Give me a thought out of Green Bay.
Well, let's take this from, a Detroit Lions perspective, because they are the class of the division right now. I know it's been short-lived because they've worked for a lot of years, but, can Green Bay keep up with Detroit? And the question when I asked that, and I've asked that a lot in my head, and I've looked into it a lot, obviously, covering the NFC North, covering the Lions, to me, this year is they could. They definitely could. I don't think they're going to. Like, the Lions still will win the division. But when you look at Christian Watson and you look at Romeo Dobbs and you look at Jaden Reed and you look at that offensive line and what they did on defense, and you mentioned obviously the coordinator changes, and then Jordan Love, who I did not think was going to even be close to as good as he's been so far.
Right.
If he keeps improving, Jason, this Packers team is going to be very tough. Now, let's back up a little bit from this Cowboys debacle. If you're a Dallas fan, the Cowboys suck. And, they're like the Maple Leafs of the NFL. They can't win playoff games. So, yes, it was embarrassing, and I thought Dallas probably should have won that game, but Green Bay made them look silly in their building. I think people are getting too excited about that one game when it comes to sustaining it for a season for Green Bay. I mean, the Lions made Green Bay look silly at times last year. So did some other teams. But once again, back to my point, if Jordan Love continues to move forward, which he's got a great chance of doing, they are going to be a very tough out no matter who they play. Obviously, Lambeau Field is a huge home field advantage, especially when the weather gets bad. Love has been great in domes. He was great in Detroit, beating them last year. So you look at this Packers team, they have a chance to reclaim being kings of the North. I think the Lions will do that. I mean, let's get more than 1 year for the Lions. It's been, what is it, almost 30 since they won the rest of it. 93 was the last time they won their division. It was 30 years. But this is going to be a race. It's going to be a race to the finish. And those games head-to-head with Detroit and Green Bay are going to mean they always mean a ton. They're going to mean even more this year, because if one of those two teams sweeps the other and you have like basically a 3-game lead if you're tied, or if you're up by, if they're in a tie situation, that's going to be huge this year, Jason. So to me, I think the Packers are going to come close. Detroit will still win the division, but Green Bay is going to make it really tough.
I definitely think one of those two teams could be vying for the number one seed in the NFC,
Yes.
given a couple breaks or an injury here or there. But and again, you're right. How they do against each other. If one can sweep the other one in those two head to heads, that could be a huge factor in getting that one seed in the NFC overall. All right. So it sounds like you like Detroit, Green Bay a close second, Chicago kind of a testy third place team, and then Minnesota to bring up the rear. Correct?
Yep, and I think Minnesota, even bringing up the rear, they still could be a 7-type win team. I think the NFC North could end up being that at least 3 of the teams, one of the better, at least top, half of the divisions of the 8 divisions. But Minnesota is going to be very up and down. The Bears, there's just too many questions to say. I feel confident about them being a playoff team, but the Lions and Packers, definitely playoff teams, definitely both worthy of winning the division. And as you mentioned, I'm totally with you. One of those teams has a great chance, whoever wins the NFC North, of being the 1 seed. And boy, can you imagine if the Lions were the 1 seed last year
Woo,
hosting the Niners?
woo.
That game would have gone a little different, I think.
You're right about that. All right, we're with Dan Leach at Dan Leach DTM on X and Twitter these days. Does some great stuff with VSiN, WHMI. Got his own little gives out a lot of great picks throughout the year. Dan, plug your picks website and what you do with that.
Listen, I'll just say this humbly. There's no one better than the Squatch. Now, I've got a great handicapping site. I've done this for a long time. I finally was able to put together a site. I gave out free picks forever, and I give out a lot of free picks still. But I just want to help people win money because gambling's legal, obviously, in so many places all around this country. So just head to dtmsquatchpicks.club. You'll see my record. You'll see everything's transparent. The packages are not expensive. And Jason, all we're doing is trying to help the people make some cash and have some
Help the
fun while
people.
doing
It's
it.
all about helping the people,
Gotta
man. It's
help the
about
people,
helping the
man.
people. All right, before I get you out of here, let's do a quick little Big Ten preview. I want to get your thoughts. Obviously, you're right in the middle of right there in Detroit, right by Ann Arbor. Give the audience just a quick over. We don't need all the news and nuggets. Just what's going on with this Michigan situation. What are the allegations? What is they got? Obviously, there was a letter of notice of allegations from NCAA. Give us a quick synopsis of what's going on there.
Yeah, listen. I mean, it all stems from the Connor Stallion situation, and we found out that he wore disguises on the sidelines. Oh no, he's like Bobby Valentine with the Mets. Listen, and it's really funny to me, and I know that people are going to say if they're listening, they're a Buckeye fan, or who knows, a Michigan State fan. How many of those are left? They're going to be like, oh well, of course they're going to say it doesn't matter. All I'm saying is this: if people think that other teams aren't stealing signals, they're being stupid. The whole thing has been frustrating. Obviously, I'm not okay with cheating. I totally get that. But did Connor Stallions and this whole sign stealing thing help Michigan win the national title? No. They were the best team in college football, Jason. It was proved over and over again. The latest, as you were asking, is that Sharon Moore allegedly deleted some texts that could have proved he was in on it. Jim Harbaugh obviously is no longer there. He's with the Chargers. He has said he doesn't, admit to anything and regret
Adamant
anything.
denial. Adamant denial.
And I don't think, listen, people are like, how could Jim Harbaugh not know? He knows everything. And I know Jim not very well, and I know a lot of people that are very close with Jim. Yes, the guy knows pretty much everything about his program. There's no way that Connor Stallions, if he didn't want Harbaugh to know, would have gone to Jim Harbaugh. So, but it doesn't even matter anymore. Michigan's the national champions. They're not going to take it away. It's all about, making sure these kind of things are policed and don't happen in the future. That obviously there's a lot of, gray area, Jason, when it comes to what you could do, what you can't do. I just want Michigan not to be the scapegoat because other teams, I'm not saying they're blameless. Other teams do the same thing.
Right.
And it's just one of these things where Ohio State fans will never get over this. Michigan State fans will never get over this. Fine. I just want there to be a way forward where all teams understand that there's got to be not archaic from the 90s rules that they were put in there because this stuff happened during the 90s.
Right.
And there wasn't, it wasn't as easy.
The technology wasn't there and all that.
So, but anyway, nothing's going to come out of the Sharon Moore text thing. Obviously, Stallions, who cares anymore? And I'm not saying that because they won the national title. Obviously, I was there. I know because I was there. But it's just it's a lot of noise. And I just hope that they can come up with a good set of regulations that, listen, if let's say a Michigan or whoever else or Mississippi State, any team gets caught doing something with not renewed, but updated rules,
right?
Then there's penalties for that. What Michigan did it was rules from 30 years ago.
Right.
So that's what I'm hoping. I don't think that's the latest as far as what we're hearing about the Sharon Moore thing. I don't think anything's going to happen.
Is
Obviously,
Sharon
Sharon
Moore in
Moore's
any danger if he gets caught lying or misleading people? Is there any potential issue there with, hey, we want a Michigan man and we don't want, is Sharon Moore in any danger there if he gets caught lying or misleading
Yeah, there
everybody?
there always is. There always is, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think Michigan's going to lead off
Yep.
this season against Fresno State. Night game, I'll be there. They play Texas at home. They play USC at home. It's
Right.
going to be an incredible year. Obviously, they lost JJ McCarthy and a lot of other players, but Michigan will be in the mix. And obviously, the Buckeyes have the best team coming in to the Big Ten this year. So it's going to be very tough for Michigan to try to repeat as Big Ten champions. But I think that this is just more outside noise. We're the dog days here. We're getting close to football, Jason, but it's not
Yep,
here. So any story like this is going to be blown up 30 times more out of proportion than it needs to be.
for
In
sure.
the end, I think Sharon Moore is going to be fine. He's going to be the head coach of Michigan. There won't be any suspensions. There won't be any further issues with this situation. Jim Harbaugh is in Los Angeles, so he could care less right now.
Connor Stallion's documentary coming out soon on
Yes.
Netflix.
It's going to be called The Steeler. The Connor Stallion story. He's going to wear different disguise. Connor Stallions is, working on the book deal and getting beaten up by, Ferris State fans. So that's it. And I just want to see Michigan
Yeah.
come out after what was a year that meant so much to me and so many other long-suffering Michigan fans that obviously they won the title in 97,
Yeah.
but they had so many good teams, Jason, and couldn't get the job done. I want to see them with this incredibly tough schedule compared to last year's, at times cream puff schedule.
Yeah.
Show the nation that, maybe they're not going to win the national title back-to-back. No one can really do that anymore.
Win 10 games, 9 or 10 games.
Yes, 9 or 10 games, maybe be in the Big Ten title game. It's obviously 1 versus 2 this year. There's no divisions
Right.
in the big expanded conference now with USC and UCLA and others coming in, Oregon. And that's I just to be at that first game, Jason. I've had season tickets to my family since the 40s. To see them raise the banner and celebrate the national title team, I can't wait for that. And then obviously it's on to a very tough schedule in a year where I think finally the Buckeyes might be able to beat us. Maybe. I mean, if I'll tell you this, if Ohio State doesn't beat Michigan this year, Ryan is gone. Ryan Day
I was
is
going to say, that's my next question.
The day is over for Ryan Day.
Pressure on Ryan Day. Obviously, you lost Michigan a couple times. They've underachieved a little bit. Him and James Franklin are, to me, the two guys with the most pressure in that conference going into this year. What has been living in the Midwest where you're at? What has been the reaction to bringing in Oregon, Washington, UCLA, and USC?
It's a great question, Jason. And I'll just tell you, first what I feel about it, because I am a traditionalist, but I'm also someone that is very forward thinking, if that makes sense. I mean, you could be someone that loves tradition, but also understands the future. I understand why they did it. I still think it's stupid. I still think that it makes no sense to me that Michigan is going to be playing a UCLA team in a conference game when one school is in California and one school is in the Midwest. But I completely understand why. You have to do it. It's survive or die. Eventually, we're probably going to have 2 conferences with 40 teams each. Whatever has to happen to keep college football at the highest level, I'm okay with. That being said, there are a lot of people that feel the way I do, and there are a lot of people that are incredible, and I'm excited too. I mean, to be able, I'm gonna be at a USC Michigan regular season home game at Michigan Stadium. That's pretty freaking awesome.
That is
same
awesome.
thing with Oregon. So when you look at the excitement of these matchups, it's awesome. But when you look at the fact that you're playing teams that you're not used to playing, and it's going to take away other rivalries. And, will Michigan play Penn State as much? Will they play, obviously, they're going to play Michigan State and Ohio State, but, playing Nebraska, playing Iowa, some of the teams, Wisconsin, now it might be every 5 years.
Right.
But that's part of what you have to understand when you're, growing towards the future. So I would say the majority of fans are excited, but there's a lot, I don't know if it's half or close to half, that are like me that just think it's silly that these teams are in the Big Ten all of a sudden, but we understand. We understand why. I can't wait to see some of these matchups on at home or on the road. But it's just a weird thing to think that you're going to have teams like Oregon, UCLA, USC, teams that Michigan or Ohio State or whoever were really playing the Rose Bowl back in the day, now playing regular season games. It just seems like, some will say you should put ketchup on hot dogs. I love it. It seems like some of these anti-ketchup people. It just seems weird.
And Oregon comes in loaded. Oregon's going to be a serious threat to Ohio State as well. A lot of people think it's Oregon, Ohio State, maybe Penn State in the mix. Are those the top 3 teams for you going in?
Oh, for sure. And listen, I have to be honest. I mean, you got to be honest when you're a broadcaster like us, Jason. I really hate to say it, though. I think the Buckeyes are going to win the Big Ten.
Okay.
That being said, does Michigan, does Penn State, does Oregon have a chance? Absolutely. But I look at that Buckeyes team, and if they can't get it done this year, they're
Right.
not getting it done. With Ryan Day and probably anytime soon. And the other factor about the teams like USC, UCLA, Oregon, etc. coming in is teams like Michigan State, of course, here in my state of Michigan. It's going to really hurt those teams. A team like, you know, Nebraska, a team like Illinois, they're going to lose out on a lot of recruits that
Right.
they would have been able to get now that you got these big boys from the former Pac-12 coming in. So that's another thing that is, I think, going to be tough for some of the fan bases. But yeah, this year for sure, Ohio State's the team. I think you closely followed by Oregon, Penn State right there. But the Wolverines, don't sleep on the Wolverines. They
Yep.
lost a lot of players, but they got a great continuity coach in Sharon Moore. Still a lot of talent on defense, and I think there's going to be a lot of orgies being had with Alex Orgy. A lot of football orgies, Jason.
All right, give me a thought. You think Dominic Raiola is the real deal at Nebraska? Is he the guy that can turn that program around a little bit?
Well, I got to give a shout out to his father, who I covered for years and did a very special video
Yeah.
for my nephew's bar mitzvah. My nephew played football as a 13-year-old for the first time, was a center, offensive lineman. He did a little video for him, but I think he's the real deal. And I know the family, so I'm not just saying this because I know the family,
Yep.
but knowing the family, I have seen the progression of this kid. And I actually used to work with Dominic's sister in a restaurant called J. Alexander's here in Michigan.
Yeah.
He is unbelievable. People haven't watched film on him. Watch film on Raiola at Nebraska. He can do everything that you want a quarterback to do. And I think you look at what he could do for the Nebraska program, that obviously the Scott, Foster did work under him. They've just kind of been in the doldrums, going back a long time. He could take Nebraska back to prominence. He's that good. He is, a Lamar Jackson type player. He is a Deshaun Watson type player.
Right.
He could put you on his back and win you a national championship.
All right, give me a team or two from the middle of the pack of the Big Ten could be a threat. A lot of people are hyping up Iowa. Obviously, defensively they're really good, but offensively they're a train wreck. It seems like. Give me a team or two that you think from the middle of the pack could I won't say win the conference, but be a factor.
Well, listen, I agree with you on Iowa. Iowa definitely is one of them, and I mean Iowa just can't score points. They got to get better on offense. But I think, listen, you look at Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota has got some talent. And can they finally get the job done with PJ Fleck? Obviously, it hasn't worked in the past, but that is a team that is, I think it's a good program. They've got a great fan base and they've got talent there. Can they, translate that into having success when it matters? They had good moments last year. They obviously didn't win in some of the games that they should have and got blasted by some teams that were much better than them. But this is a team that, they opened up against North Carolina. They played Rhode Island and Nevada. Then Iowa, in their first 4 weeks of the season, they go 4-0 going to that Michigan game in Ann Arbor. You never know, my friend. So Minnesota's the other team I'm looking at in the Big Ten this year.
All right, last question. I'll get you out of here. Obviously, the new playoff format. How many do you think get out of the Big Ten and get into that 12-teamer?
First off, why did we have a 12-teamer 30 years ago? I mean, you 10 years ago. Secondly, I think there's three teams out of the Big Ten. I think that you're going to see consistently going forward. Obviously, we're going to have to see how different schedules come out and who plays who. But I think the Big Ten is going to probably have a minimum of 3 in every year. And there could be years where they have 4 or more. But there's just so much talent now when you look at what USC could be. Obviously, you mentioned Oregon, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. You've got such good teams and talent bases and fan bases and programs that I think that the ceiling, the floor is going to be 3. You could get a lot more. But I think this year 3.
All right. And do you think a 3-loss team is going to get, not forget the Big Ten, just in general, in the national landscape, will a 3-loss team get into the playoff, do you think?
Unless, well, if Saban was still there, I would say you'd have to be Alabama. They'd be the only one. But no, I do not think that a 3-loss team will get in. Obviously, when you have 12 teams, Jason, there's a chance that you might have a 3-loss team that lost 3 games by a combined 5 points to like 3 of the top 5 teams in the country. It could happen. But to me, with all the talent, especially this expanded Big Ten conference, SEC, obviously the smaller conferences, they're going to have some access to this as well. I just don't see a 3-loss team getting in. Two losses for sure, at least a few, but 3 losses would take a freaking miracle.
And last question. Give me a thought on Notre Dame. I
You
know
said
that
that was the last question.
you're right. I
I don't care.
screwed
You can
up.
ask me an easy one.
Give me a thought on Notre Dame. I know they're not in the conference, but they're right there in your neck of the
Who
woods.
cares about Notre Dame?
Ah!
No, Notre Dame, I think, has a chance
A lot of expectation. I
to
think they could,
really.
if they can win the A&M game, look out.
Yes, I think that Notre Dame has a lot of talent, and I think you look at what they've been able to do, kind of getting out of different eras, and they obviously struggled for a long time. And when you look at what you get with Freeman, what you get with this new coaching staff, I think that this is the best chance they've had in a while to kind of springboard. I mean, listen, it's still, people don't not know this. It's still very tough to get into Notre Dame.
Oh
They've
yeah.
got standards there. That's
Oh
why a
yeah.
lot. I mean, Stanford as well. That's why when David Shaw was doing a good job there, and Brian Kelly and Notre Dame, people don't realize they're not just letting people in to let them in like other schools do. I think you've got a chance now for them finally to springboard and become a threat again. I mean, they got to join a conference, right, Jason? They got to join the Big Ten at some point. But for now, they've got to, this could be the year where they really springboard and becoming, they've had good years, but really become a team that people are afraid of. And I think you're going to see a very excited Notre Dame fan base this year. I think this could be you mentioned the game against A&M. They come out and win that game. Yeah, look out. I mean, this is a team that really had some moments last year, finished strong at times, and then obviously had some issues in games where they should have played much better in. But I like Notre Dame, and I just want to see them in a conference and stop being so elitist.
Well, Dan Leach, the Squatch man, great work, man. I appreciate it. The Lions, Brad Holmes from Tampa, went to high school right down the street from where I live.
Really? Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes, baby. He's a Tampa guy. Keep up the great work. VSIN, WHMI, DTM, SquatchPicks.club for all your picks on Saturdays and Sundays. Keep up the great work, man. I appreciate the time.
Hey, the honor is all mine. And until next time, believe in the dream, my friend.
I got you.